Hello, world. Welcome to episode 34 of the Podcast Monitor. Last time we created this Twitter class to wrap Tweepy, and we were testing it out on our Twitter account. And now we're going to do some refactoring of this. And basically we're going to do so to kind of keep some of the logic and the usage of this internalized. Also, I think we're going to do some refactoring to be able to do some kind of testing because we don't actually have any testing for this. And so since it does it doesn't simply wrap the API, it'll probably be good to have some testing in place like we do for everything else. So let's get started. The first things that we kind of want to do is we only want to tweet. We don't want to do the get tweets aspect of it because the only thing we're actually going to be doing from the podcast monitor is tweeting out information. We want this Twitter class to kind of determine things, and so we don't need to worry about returning the IDs for anything or returning really anything except maybe possibly a success fail from the tweet, but in that case we probably just should raise an exception if it happens, if something fails, and really that's already done because we don't catch exceptions. I do have only tweet, no return IDs, reply with the text match only. Okay, so that's why we're saying we could represent this as a class. So basically, let's update these here. So in this case, we're not going to return the ID. So this is simply like that because we're never actually going to use it. Okay, we're going to make this get tweets here a method that isn't intended to be used, and this is also not so this is going to get tweets. So here, actually, let's do this. We'll say count 20 match string. So here we're actually just going to return matches. So we're going to say get matching tweets, and we'll return a list of integers. So we'll return the tweet.id for tweets in tweets if match in tweet.text. So now this here, the tweets are already matching tweets, so we just need to actually adjust this to call that. We can get rid of this. And now this is just list of ints. So we could say tweet IDs. And we can move this here. And the reply ID is equal to the ID. We don't care about the response because it doesn't return anything, so we can get rid of that. Do this, and we don't need to return anything here. And this is no longer going to return. And we don't need to give it this reply ID anymore because we're not going to use that. So we can get rid of this. we don't have this in here either. If not match, send tweet. Otherwise, we will come in here and get the matching tweets, and then send, for each of those, send a tweet. Let's see. That should be everything. Is there any other way? I kind of want to restructure this. So I could say if match, do all that. Otherwise, just send a tweet. Okay, I mean, that's good. I think that's fine. The other thing I could do is, right, I could create like a list and put that, but this is kind of simple as is. And that all looks like that's right. So add an extra line here. And let's test this out. So let's check out our Twitter account real quick. Why don't we reply to any of them that say test? So there's 3 that say test in it. So we'll come in here, we'll switch back to the prototype, and we'll say Twitter dot tweet, and we'll tweet found it, and the match string will be test. So let's run this and see if it works. Python prototype. Missing get matching tweets. Oh, here. So now get matching tweets does that. Well, I guess, right, that's the other thing we could do here is we could say, you know, where do we use match? So let's just check through. If I do Python none in something. Okay, so that doesn't work. That throws an error. Because the other thing we could do, right, is we could, you know, we could say, for example, in here, what about the other thing? I'm just testing a few different ways that we could always check this out. So if none print found. Okay. So what we could do is we could say always call this with match. If not match, return an empty list, or a list with none, right? So it returns that, and then it would just switch to this, right? So basically, right, if you're gonna tweet, it's gonna get any matching tweets, right, that match this. Now, if nothing was given, it'll come in and it'll say, okay, there's nothing here, return this list, there are no matching IDs. Then when it calls here, right, we could actually remove this default. So this will be none in this case. The reply ID I can just do reply ID there. The reply ID, actually I like the other one better aesthetically. So the reply ID is none because so it will loop, right? We just saw that it will loop through. It does find this to be a thing to loop through. So it'll loop. So I guess so it'll be like if we did here, right? So for x in none print x. And if we had a second one, right? So it does loop through these. So right, but if I said if empty list print, it doesn't do anything because the empty list counts as false, but a list with none in it counts as true. So in that case, if we do have a match string, we'll come in here. They'll say, okay, well, we're not going to match anything, right? So we can't do this, and there's also no point in checking the timeline to do that. So we can simply return that list, right? So it'll loop through this. The ID here will be none, which will come into here, which is fine. And then I am going to leave that there simply because it then kind of indicates that if this is none, you know, that'll work. So kind of it's just an indication. But if it does get a match, right, then it will come in and it'll find all the matches like we were doing before. So that should work out well. So now let's try running this again. Okay, and then we'll switch over to here. And we'll refresh. And so anything that had test, we said found it. So test, test 2, test 3. Right, so everything looks to be working out very nicely. So get status, if, let's count that out, and we'll say am refactored Twitter, only tweet and reply through matching text. All right, so the other thing I want to refactor is that, right, so if let's say I wanted to test this out, I can't really do that, right? I mean, I can, right? I could have a test, I can create a functional test. I can have a test account that I can always tweet to, find the tweet, and delete the tweet, right? But I'm not going to do that. I'm sure Twitter would mind, but I don't think it's necessary. If we run into issues, if we can nail down that this logic is fine, we run into issues with the tweets, then it will come somewhere from these API calls, the update status or the user reading from the user timeline, right? And so then we can always investigate that at that time. But for now, we just want to be able to kind of tweak that this logic works, right? And so what we really need to do is really need to be able to not call this and not call this, and instead, right? So instead, we basically want to create a fake a fake API that will, when we have a user timeline, it'll return. You can return an ID. Right. So here we had this stub which returned this, fake data. And then I think we had a fake somewhere. Did we or did we not create a fake? No, I guess not. So this will be an opportunity to do that anyway. But so basically what we want to be able to do is, create a fake that has kind of an internal list, and that list will have, IDs and text. And then we'll be able to just grab that list of those things. And then we'll be able to, so we will end up creating kind of a tweet class, but just for test purposes. And then we'll be able to run this and read things, and we'll be able to submit things to it. And then, so I guess we'll also need kind of like in reply to, so like something that like, what did you reply to with it? So we kind of need those 3 elements. But to do that, we need to refactor out this API, because we basically need to be able to pass in a different API there, right? So what we need to do is have the Twitter API here, and then remove this and say self.api equals Twitter API. And so let's create a Twitter API. And basically we will take these here. So this will now do all the stuff. Actually, yeah, let me just, this is going to do all this anyway. And I need a version over here, right? So this is still going to have the secrets. And we will come in here, and so we'll still have this. And let's get rid of these things here. So we have the Twitter API, but now this Twitter API doesn't have these methods, right? And so the easiest way to do that is to simply call through and say API or update status. Status self So now we're kind of doing what we were almost doing initially. We're basically just wrapping these things in another API. Well, so do we need to do the whole API? Can we do? We can't do the auth. Yeah, I guess we need to do the whole API. Apply ID. So then we'll do self.api.update. So we have this, and then we def user timeline self count return that, and then in here now we're going to replace this with these methods at there, and user timeline count. All right, so it's almost like we didn't do anything, but what we did was make it more testable, right? So we basically we took the right, if you consider that we basically just have multiple wrappers, but now we're in control of this wrapper, right? Which will allow us to substitute it in for something else. And so in here, actually, we can say, well, I guess we can't even say Twitter API, because we would need to be able to pass in. So we'll just leave that. So right, we created kind of another layer of abstraction. So we have the Twitter API, and then there is the wrapper around the Twitter API, Tweepy. and then we are wrapping Tweepy in our Twitter API class, and that will allow, and all that does is it does the authentication, and then it simply calls the methods with the same sort of thing. So now, if we wanted, we can basically create like Twitter. You can create a fake. Or, yeah. Okay. We can create a fake Twitter API, and then for that, right, you have the init, self, secrets. We don't care about that. We'll have the update status, self, MSG, apply ID, and we'll have the user timeline. Right, and then so we basically just need to kind of implement these methods, and then we can use them for testing, right? So we'll probably have an internal. So here we'd probably have like an internal, and we probably need like a tweets class. And so part of me thinks it might make sense to create a separate, folder to start holding all this Twitter stuff, because we're going to have that, and then we'll have a tweet, and we could put them in, you know, a few files, but we might as well split them out. So I'm going to remove this for now. Save this here. Check out git diff. Yeah, so right, so as you can see, like we do have some very kind of similar things. So let's test out that this works. And so all right, so I have one called I have the hello world again, the hi from the Twitter class. So let's come in and let's say, okay, let's go Twitter.tweet. So the other thing is, so we actually have to adjust this now. So we now have to say from Twitter, import Twitter and Twitter API. So Twitter API secrets, and we're going to pass that to there. Right, and then so we can pass a test one in if we want. So in here, we're going to go tweet, and we'll say testing with extracted API. And the match is going to be, we'll do one of the original tweets, the hi from the Twitter class. Let's go all the way back there. All right, so now let's try this. Let's go Python prototype. Okay, and let's check it out. Let's see if it worked. Refresh. And so the hi from the Twitter class, and we've just tweeted now testing there. So that seems to have worked out well. So let's commit this. We'll say git commit and extracted tweetb into Twitter API. All right. So now that we did that, we could probably move it to a new file. So let's create a Twitter API.py. And remove this from here. So remove all of this from here. except we'll come in and we'll do this. We'll say from Twitter API import Twitter API. That way we can use this as the reference. Okay, now we have that there, and now we just need to come into here. So let's respond to this one with split out files. And Python prototype. No errors, check it out. Over here. Alright, instead of once we have tests, we want to do all this to test it, right? So now you have the yesterday's hi from the Twitter class testing, then we were just testing with abstractions, and then we had split out files. So git add and git commit created or split Twitter API into separate file. All right. So now let's create a Twitter directory. And we will move those two into there. And now I think the main thing will be in here. We'll need to do Twitter API. So again, let's do and we'll get rid of this. No module Twitter.api is, oh, it's because I'm calling it from outside, isn't it? Because yeah, it's the Twitter.py that's complaining. See, and that's kind of what we hit with things here, where we had this utils. Where it was, doing this, and actually, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to move these. Oh no, this needs to be in here. Okay. Because it needs to have a way out. But I'm going to copy these. So, okay, actually here. You know what I'm going to do? Git status. Git. I'm going to get rid of this for now. So the reason is because if I want to split out basically, right, so I have the tests. If I want to, start separating these, I need to do the file structure a little better, because basically what I would need to do is this is going to need to be able to input, ensure the input, like this is going to be able to, in the tests, have to be able to call this, right? So like in here, you're going to need to be able to call the ensure import, and that's going to need to be able to import the root, right? So it needs to know the project root and import that. And then really the best thing to do there is after it does that, so after it does the project root, it would need to call from the root another ensure import from here, which would then, so it would which would then basically set up it for all the subdirectories. And then I'm going to need to move this stuff into subdirectories that in some way like kind of aligns to this, and then all the paths would kind of get set up. So I'm not going to do that now. I'll consider doing that in the future. For now, we'll keep just dumping all these things in here. So let's just create the fake real quick. So let's go Twitter API fake.py. Take this, come in here, not in there, in here, paste that. We don't need this. This will be called fake. Get rid of all this stuff. Let's have class tweet self.text. So we'll say text, or we'll do ID text parent ID, self.text equals text, self.ID equals ID, self.parent equals parent ID. And then in here, we'll have self.tweets is the empty list. And then we'll say self.tweets.append fake API tweet we need to give that a number, message, reply ID. So we'll need to come up with what that is. Our last ID there. Get rid of this, get rid of that. And then in here, we just need to return self.tweets. All right, I believe that's the right slice for that. So if we do, let's just do Python. So if we have 1, 2, 3, 4, and we slice, we want 2. Okay, cool. Works. And then actually, let me also so the last ID is going to be, we'll say max. So this will be the last ID plus 1. And it's going to be the max ID for, or we'll do t.id for t in self.user Actually, I guess we'll do self.tweets. Alright, that should work. Let's just do some quick testing for this. So we'll say fake Twitter API equals this, API.update status, test, print, API.tweets. Def str ID parent self. Alright, let's try this out. Python Twitter API fake. Arg is an empty sequence. So we'll say if self.tweets or no, it's we'll do that if self.tweets else -1. So the last ID there isn't any, which will then make the first one 0. And then print API tweets. It's a list. Tweet object. Well, it should print. Oh. It's not printing this. Is it just because it's in the list? What if I made it a repper? Would that print automatically? Okay, so that one does. Alright, so then there we have a tweet, has no parent, and then we tweeted test, so let's try test 1, test 2, make that 0. And we'll just say print user timeline. API.user timeline, and what if we do none? I feel like it's not going to work. Oh no, okay, so that's fine. So in here we'll also say count equals none, just so we don't have to pass it. And there you go. Now we have a few tweets. The last one in reply to those others, right? So that's basically, this is basically kind of what we're doing. This is basically how the Twitter API is functioning. So we now kind of have this little fake here, and we can use this to create tests for this by making sure that we can actually map or match against these, and then we'll reply and do that. So that'll be what we go with next time. So it's like git add and git commit created fake Twitter API. All right, so next time we will write out the tests for this. Until then, see you.